guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jade from Jaded Reader, and today's topic is STEM picture books and YA science fiction. I'm going to go through the kids' books first, so you can go ahead and look out on the screen somewhere, and I will put the time if you are not interested in the picture book section. First on my list, we have Batman Science, Batarangs, and Grapnels, The Science Behind Batman's Utility Belt by Agnieszka Biskup. I said it enough times, I think I can say it perfectly now. This book had both history and science, which I thought was really nice. It goes through, as you would guess, Batman's utility belt. It starts out with topics such as the Batarang and how it's related to the boomerang. I would have preferred a little bit more science in this book since it is called Batman Science, and I found that it was kind of lacking in how things work, but more of where they came from. I think if your main goal is to make science more interesting for your readers, or if your child loves reading and is maybe less interested in science, this might be a good book for them to pick up. I think it's definitely a good introduction to different sciences, and it might get them more interested in the subjects. And I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Outdoor Math Fun Activities for Every Season by Emma Adbaje. This book had a lot of fun outdoor activities, more than I even expected, and a lot I hadn't heard of. I will say that most of the activities were group activities, so it's a little easier to do in a classroom versus at home, but I can still see altering some of them and having a lot of fun with it. It goes through each season, but the multiplication and division were pretty much just brushed over, and so I kind of found that to be a little bit of a bummer. And I know multiplication is a lot of the time where kids start having difficulties, but I think this gives a great foundation. I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars, and one of the reasons I did that is because I think this gives a really good introduction and gets kids comfortable with math at an early age. Math is something for me that I think gets stigmatized really easily, and I think that putting it in different subjects can be really helpful for getting kids comfortable with it. In this book, it had a lot of unique activities, such as measuring worms or cooking cakes, and I just thought that that was a really neat way of doing so because it introduces math into different areas besides just doing formulas on paper. I know growing up I had quite a few insecurities when I was learning math, and I think if it would have been introduced to me in less of a standardized way and more of a fun way, I would have been a lot more confident going in, and instead of looking at it as something that's gross or a necessary evil, I would have looked at it as what it is, which is pretty much just a learning tool that's in almost every aspect of our lives. I've had a lot of really nightmarish moments with math, I'm sure you have too. However, I've also had a lot of fun moments with math, and I don't think I would have felt that way if I would have started using more unconventional ways of using math. Just like reading, I think math has its highs and lows, and it ends up being how you present math that gives kids fresh starts and gets them really comfortable with the concepts. That being said, Zero the Hero was definitely not my favorite book of this batch. I won't give it no credit. It had a lot of really good ideas. I just thought some of the lessons were a little misleading. In the story, you're presented with Zero, who wants to be a hero but feels like he's nothing next to his peers. You can see the joke there, as Zero is the symbolic representation of nothing, and all the numbers stand in for quantities. I really liked where this book was going to start with, but a couple problems I had with this book was its interpretation of the word friend. I see this happening a lot in books, and that's that they'll use the word friend as a substitution for peers or classmates. And I'm gonna be real, these numbers treat Zero like crap. It's not until they realize that they can't be higher numbers without him that they end up looking for him, and at first are happy that he's gone. They are captured by Roman numerals, which I thought was interesting. I had no quarrels there. The other thing I found in this book was kind of the opposite of what I was talking about in the outdoor math book. This does not have a strong foundation for math. It kind of has some math rules in it, which could help kids familiarize with it. But one of those first concepts I like to teach kids is place values, because when you are adding numbers together or multiplying, kids just stick the numbers down in where they belong, and because they don't know their place values, they'll add things together not really knowing that they're adding tens. They'll think of them as adding ones. So if you have 55 plus 11, you're going to add 5 plus 1 equals 6, and then 5 plus 1 equals 6. But really, the second set is 50 plus 10 equals 60. So in this book, at some point, when they realize that Zero is gone and they are still happily counting without him, they add 5 plus 2 plus 3 equals, and it's supposed to be 10. You'll see that 1 is still in the placeholder of where 10 goes, and you'll see that there's nothing in the 1's place. It says, this place reserved for 0. Here's my problem, is this is the 1's place, and there's nothing there. Check. And this is the 10's place, and there's a quantity of 10 there. So there's not actually anything wrong with this, and it kind of seems to me like this could be confusing if you're trying to teach place values. It's something that often is overlooked when teaching math, and this kind of cancels out, no pun intended, the idea of place values. And I felt that in the end, his friendships were still really unhealthy and that they didn't like him until they needed him. The last line goes like this: "With his friends around him once more, and the knowledge that he had fought evil and won, Zero no longer felt empty inside. Now that hollow nothingness inside him was filled with something, and that something was joy." So overall, I'm giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I know it seems silly to rate kids' books. I usually also put my scores on Common Sense Media since I find more parents go to that site. So if you're ever looking for good picture books or kids' books and you're not finding what you're looking for on Goodreads, Common Sense Media is definitely another area you check and maybe find other recommendations or warnings. The next book I read was The Inventor's Secret: What Thomas Edison Told Henry Ford by Suzanne Slade, illustrated by Jennifer Black Reinhardt. And here's the cover, so we all know what book I'm talking about. I really loved this book, and I love the way they presented Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. Henry Ford and Thomas Edison were actually best friends in real life. They didn't meet until they were much older, and I really enjoyed that they accurately represented their friendship. Sometimes kids' books will kind of change around the storyline a bit, and this didn't do that. It has them inspiring each other until they finally meet and start talking, and they end up putting their ideas together, and it's all really cool. Another heavy theme in this book was definitely scientists sharing their ideas. You'll see scientists by themselves in books, and I really liked that they put these two together because most of science is definitely a collaboration and a team activity, and I really liked how they constructed this book. My one complaint is while most of the activities they are seen doing in the beginning as children are endearing, I found this one to be a bit problematic, and I'm just gonna say this: don't experiment on animals. Yes, they had them experimenting on animals in this book. It's just a small part of the book. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I'll just read this one part. Most of all, Thomas was curious about electricity, visible energy that flows and stopped, sizzled and popped. He tied wires to his cat's tail and rubbed their fur. Sparks flew that day. I can't decide who's more shook, me or that poor cat. And you'll see he has 3 different cats with wires wrapped around its tails, and they all looked pretty frizzled out. So that was my only complaint about this book. Otherwise, it was really cute, and I would recommend it. Maybe just say something, because like, mad scientists are one thing, animal experimenters are quite another. My next book was Charles Darwin's Around the World Adventure by Jennifer Thermes. I ended up being fascinated with this book. It didn't end up having anything really to do with evolution, but it was more about Charles Darwin's like young adult life and like who he was as a person, and I really enjoyed that. I was looking at this book thinking it was going to talk about beginner evolution, and instead it ended up being like what kind of kid he was, how curious he was as an explorer, and I think they ended up adding a lot of human qualities that I otherwise wouldn't have known about Charles Darwin, and it made him not only more personable, but it made finding discoveries that mean something to the world a lot more possible. It starts out the book by saying that teachers didn't think he was very intelligent, and at one point he puts a beetle in his mouth because he doesn't have room in his pocket. I don't know why this fascinated me so much, but I thought it was such an interesting thing to add into his book, and I thought it explained a lot about him. Like, it was kind of like Charles Darwin was a little weirdo, and this was 5 out of 5 stars in my book. My final children's book for my STEM Kids review was Ada Lovelace, Poet of Science by Diane Stanley, illustrated by Jesse Hartland. I didn't like this book. I was so excited because, I mean, number one, it's a woman scientist. She's the first computer programmer. I picked up this book with every expectation of loving it, and I found that it was kind of, for a kid, not very interesting. And I thought it, as an adult, I thought the beginning was really interesting and I was hooked, and it unhooked me really fast. Some of the things that I found in there that was a little problematic was how they talk about the parents' relationship. There's a lot of overshares as far as the parents' relationship goes. On top of that, the way it speaks about the father is a little a little much for me. I'm not quite sure what the point was. It was kind of out of nowhere, but Lady Byron was worried. Ada seemed overexcited. Worse, she showed dangerous signs of too much imagination. In other words, she was becoming her father. Ada's parents were as different as chalk and cheese. Her father, the famous poet Lord Byron, was a worldwide celebrity, the rock star of his time. Her mother, Lady Byron, was interested in math and science. She was rational, respectable, and strict. The marriage only lasted a year. I don't know, just something about this rubbed me the wrong way. While it tries to be really whimsical, I think it kind of misses the mark there. I didn't quite understand what they were trying to do. It seems like they were trying to put a little bit of her personality in, like was done with Charles Darwin's book, but instead it ended up just kind of being all over the place. My other complaint about it was honestly just that it was boring. Like, it just kept on talking and it wasn't interesting, and I was really bummed about it because I really wanted to like this book. So yeah, I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars. I didn't feel like it had as much of a learning aspect to it as, like, I don't even know. I didn't like it. Judge it for yourself. It's at the library. Finally, onto my sci-fi reads. I read Illuminae and Gemina in this past few weeks. I'll be putting it in my wrap-up, but I just wanted to give a brief review on these. A lot of the time, these are presented as sci-fi books non-sci-fi lovers would love, and as a sci-fi fan, I just wanted to give my perspective on it. I started out really skeptical while reading these books. I loved the format. I thought the format was super cool, but some of like the dialogue I found super cheesy, and I didn't think I was gonna like it as much as I ended up loving it. I'll say that right off the bat, actually. I loved these. I'm actually only halfway through Obsidio, but I started them and got through them within like a week, and these were really quick reads. I highly recommend listening to it with the audiobook. The only really complaints I had audiobook-wise was, and it's gonna sound dumb, but when they put like ZZZ for like sleeping or snoring or like, I don't know. However you use like the Z emoji in your text messages, imagine it used in this book. The sound that the audiobook people made, they changed it and fixed it in Gemina. Let me say that as well. They changed it and fixed it in Gemina, but it's this guttural noise in this one that each time I was like, that's my only complaint about the audiobook. The audiobook is otherwise a great companion to this. I'm not even sure if I could go back and read these without the audiobook because it was so much fun. I hope I don't open to a page that like gives spoilers. The text format, the different types of ways that they talk, the characters all really grew on me. I wasn't expecting to love the second half of this book as much as I did. I went in thinking I was going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was good sci-fi. I've read better. I've read way worse because sci-fi can get there. There was a turning point in this series, and I was so invested in what was happening that I ended up just devouring the second half. I'm really interested in character-driven books, and I thought I was not going to like this book as much because I wasn't as into the characters, and they really grow on you. So now when I solve even the basic of my computer errors, I feel like Katie Grant, and I become like an Astro Princess, so that's cool. That's something I gained out of this book. Gemina ended up being a really well-rounded book, I found. I thought this one was a little bit more consistent in my feelings towards it, but I don't know if it's because I read this, loved it, and like jumped into Gemina. I will say I found Gemina a lot more consistent in like my feelings. I felt like my feelings went through like highs and lows in this book, but my feelings were pretty consistent with Gemina. This is gonna totally contradict everything I just said. While I'm giving Illuminae 5 out of 5 stars, I'm giving Gemina a 4 out of 5 stars. My highs were so high in this book, and my lows were just like medium lows, and I was consistently like at a medium high this entire book. I had never read anything like it. I'll never have this experience again. So I'm giving my experience a 5 out of 5 stars because I refuse to take it for granted. Gemina, I'm giving a 4 out of 5 stars because it was fun, it continued the story, I needed to know what happened next, and it fulfilled everything I needed. Obsidio, I can't rate yet because I'm on page 167, don't spoil anything for me, I'm enjoying it so far. I thought a character was going to be in it, and I was right, and I was happily right. So it was a pleasant surprise because I usually am not right. I'll definitely be talking talking more about Obsidio in my wrap-up, but I felt like if I was gonna do a STEM children's book thing, I might as well throw in some of my sci-fi thoughts. It all seemed to swirl together really nicely. So in my last video, I talked about the fact that I do get Owlcrate subscriptions, and I did read my last Owlcrate subscription before Sky in the Deep, so I figured I would do a quick review since I was on Sci-Fi, and I don't think I ever want to talk about this book again. Heart of Iron by Ashley Poston. Because this is the Owlcrate edition, it has gold text and beautiful purple pages. I wish I liked the inside of this book as much as I loved the outside. It was a really big letdown. I found this book to be all over the place. The writing was, in some points, really off for me. I would read sentences and I wouldn't quite know what they meant. And that's hard to read. I also thought that there was maybe too many characters, and it wasn't like I was overwhelmed by how many characters there were. I mean, I read several sci-fi and fantasy that deals with multiple character perspectives, but it was that I didn't really care about them. At some points I thought I was going to care about them, but then they'd get annoying, or they would do things that seemed inconsistent with the character we'd known so far. I found the romance to be kind of weird as well. Like, I just didn't dig it. I don't want to go into any spoilers because, I mean, if you want to read it, you should read it. I don't think I'll do a spoiler review for this, honestly, just because I don't want to talk about it anymore. I didn't even remember it very well. I really loved the Owlcrate this came in. It's where I got my infinity purple scarf that I'm still in love with. It was well worth it for the scarf, quite honestly. And I got my Star Wars bookmark from it as well. Overall, I wasn't disappointed with the Owlcrate, but I was disappointed with the book that month. It single-handedly made me wary of beautiful books. I ended up giving Heart of Iron 2 out of 5 stars. Just because I couldn't come up with enough things that I liked about it to give it a better rating, and I'm not gonna literally rate a book by its cover. So I think that's it for this video. I really had a lot of fun reading all the different kids books within the same theme. If you had fun with it, let me know if I should keep doing that. Otherwise, I kind of just go into the library and I go into the kids section and I look at books that I think I would be interested in or that I think kids could learn something from. I hope you have a good rest of your night or day, and I will see you next time. Bye! It still got me with a plot twist. And then this one happened and I was like, we're all doomed. And then, no, that's a spoiler. And I loved the way they presented Thomas Edison, and I almost said Harrison Ford. This is not Han Solo. This is an inventor.